Tattoos today are about art, identity, and freedom. Walk into any tattoo parlor in New York, London, or Tokyo, and you'll see people choosing designs that speak to their soul, their story, their rebellion against the mundane. But for pirates, tattoos were marks of death, loyalty, and superstition. They were contracts written in ink and blood, binding their bearers to a life that most would never dare to live. When we look at modern tattoo culture, we see when pirates looked at their tattoos, they saw survival guides, spiritual armor, and declarations of war against civilization itself. These weren't Instagram-worthy pieces of body art. These were the desperate prayers of men and women who had chosen to live outside the law, outside society, and often outside hope itself. The ocean has always been humanity's greatest mystery, stretching endlessly beyond every horizon, hiding treasures and terrors in equal measure. And somewhere in those vast waters, where the civilized world ended and chaos began, pirates carved their stories not just into legend, but into their very flesh. So, what did pirate tattoos really mean, and why were sailors willing to scar their skin forever for them? The answers lie deeper than most dare to dive. To understand pirate tattoos, we must first sail back to the origins of maritime body art itself. Long before European pirates terrorized the Caribbean, long before Blackbeard struck fear into merchant hearts, tattoos flourished in the tropical paradises of the Pacific. The Polynesian Islands, Micronesia, the Philippines, and countless other island cultures had perfected the art of marking skin with meaning. When European explorers first encountered these Pacific peoples in the 16th and 17th centuries, they witnessed something that both fascinated and horrified them. Entire bodies covered in intricate designs, each line and curve telling a story of courage, status, spiritual power, and tribal identity. The word tattoo itself comes from the Tahitian word tato, meaning to mark or strike. But these weren't mere decorations. They were living manuscripts, personal histories written in permanent ink. European sailors, spending months at sea with nothing but endless water and alien stars, found themselves drawn to these foreign shores not just for provisions and trade, but for transformation. In Polynesian culture, receiving a tattoo was a rite of passage, a spiritual journey that required endurance, courage, and commitment. The process could take weeks, involving painful sessions where bone needles drove pigment deep into skin, creating marks that would last a lifetime. For sailors accustomed to the rigid hierarchies and suffocating rules of naval life, these tattoos represented something intoxicating: freedom, freedom to mark their bodies as they chose, freedom to carry stories that no captain could confiscate, freedom to transform themselves from anonymous crew members into individuals with permanent personal narratives. The spiritual aspect of these early tattoos cannot be understated. Polynesian and Southeast Asian cultures believed tattoos possessed genuine protective power. They weren't just symbols of protection. They were protection itself. Warriors would tattoo guardian spirits onto their bodies before battle. Fishermen would ink symbols to ensure safe passage through dangerous waters. Shamans would embed sacred designs that connected them to ancestor spirits and ocean gods. When European sailors adopted these practices, they brought this spiritual dimension with them. But as tattoos spread from legitimate merchant marines to the lawless world of piracy, their meanings evolved and darkened. What began as spiritual protection became badges of rebellion. What started as cultural appreciation became tools of intimidation. What originated as community bonding became markers of those who had chosen to exist outside any community at all. Pirates were, by definition, outcasts. They had rejected the social contracts that bound ordinary people to nation, family, and faith. In choosing piracy, they chose a life where death was always close, where loyalty was bought with gold and blood, and where the only law was the one written by sword and cannon. In such a world, tattoos served purposes that civilized society could barely comprehend. The transformation of tattoos from spiritual protection to pirate identity markers happened gradually, but it was profound. Where Polynesian tattoos told stories of honor and community standing, pirate tattoos told stories of desperation and defiance. Where traditional tattoos connected individuals to their ancestors and gods, pirate tattoos announced their separation from everything sacred and lawful. As piracy flourished in the golden age of piracy, roughly from 1650 to 1730, tattoos became as common among buccaneers as cutlasses and rum. Every major pirate haven, from Tortuga to Madagascar, featured tattoo artists who understood the specific needs and desires of their outlaw clientele. These weren't skilled cultural practitioners carrying on ancient traditions. These were often pirates themselves, using crude needles and improvised inks to mark their brothers in arms. The tattoos that emerged from this criminal subculture were raw, brutal, and laden with meanings that would chill the blood of respectable society. Each design told a story, but these were stories of murder, betrayal, supernatural terror, and the constant dance with death that defined pirate existence. To understand these tattoos is to understand the pirate soul itself. Violent, superstitious, loyal to nothing but the brotherhood of the damned, and utterly committed to living free or dying in the attempt. Pirates chose their tattoos carefully, because, in their world, everything had meaning. Every symbol could mean the difference between life and death, between acceptance and rejection by their crews, between spiritual protection and abandonment by whatever gods might still listen to the prayers of murderers and thieves. The most iconic of all pirate tattoos, the skull and crossbones, served as both warning and philosophy. To modern eyes, it might seem like an obvious choice for criminals and outcasts, but its meaning went far deeper than simple intimidation. The skull and crossbones represented the pirate's fundamental acceptance of death as a constant companion and their rejection of the illusion that life held any permanent security. In conventional society, people lived as if death were a distant possibility, something that happened to others, something that could be avoided through careful living and divine favor. Pirates knew better. They had seen good men die from infected cuts, from random cannon shots, from storms that appeared without warning. They had killed men themselves, watched the light fade from eyes that minutes before had been full of life and hope. Death wasn't a possibility in their world. It was the most reliable certainty they possessed. By tattooing skulls and crossbones onto their skin, pirates weren't celebrating death or trying to appear frightening. Though these tattoos certainly had that effect. They were making a philosophical statement. I have nothing left to lose, because I have already lost everything that matters. This wasn't nihilism exactly, but it was close. It was the mindset of men who had pushed their lives so far outside the boundaries of normal human experience that conventional fears no longer applied to them. The skull and crossbones tattoo also served as a form of psychological warfare. When merchant sailors saw these marks on captured pirates, they understood immediately that they were dealing with people who had made peace with their own mortality. How do you threaten someone with death when they've already accepted it? How do you intimidate someone who carries the symbol of ultimate fear permanently etched into their flesh? But perhaps most importantly, The skull and crossbones tattoo was a mark of brotherhood among pirates themselves. It identified the bearer as someone who had crossed the line from civilization into the dark freedom of outlawry. It was a permanent resignation letter from respectable society, burned so thoroughly that return was impossible. These tattoos varied in style and complexity. Some featured simple, crude skulls with basic crossed bones beneath. Others incorporated additional elements: hourglasses to represent the passage of time, roses to symbolize the beauty that death steals, or flames to suggest the hellfire that awaited. Each variation carried its own specific message within the broader theme of mortality acceptance. The anchor tattoo told a completely different story, one of hope and stability in lives defined by chaos and uncertainty, while the skull and crossbones announced the pirates' acceptance of death. The anchor proclaimed their desperate desire for something permanent, something reliable, something that could hold them steady in the storms of their chosen existence. Traditionally, anchors represented exactly what they did for ships: security, stability, the promise of safe harbor after dangerous voyages. For legitimate sailors, an anchor tattoo meant the hope of returning home, of dropping anchor in familiar harbors where loved ones waited. But for pirates, who had no homes to return to, and no families who would welcome them back, the anchor took on more complex meanings. Many pirates tattooed anchors as symbols of their commitment to the sea itself. They had chosen the ocean as their permanent home, their nation, their church, and their grave. The anchor represented their willingness to be held by this choice, to be permanently moored to a life of maritime outlawry. It was both acceptance and defiance. Acceptance of their exile from land-based society, and defiance of any attempt to drag them back to civilization. Some pirates incorporated additional elements into their anchor tattoos. Chains wrapped around the anchor shaft represented the unbreakable bonds of crew loyalty. Hearts pierced by the anchor suggested love for the pirate life that was both passionate and painful. Ropes coiled around the anchor indicated the complex web of relationships, debts, and obligations that held pirate crews together despite their fundamental lawlessness. The anchor also served as a practical identifier. In an age before photography or reliable identification systems, tattoos helped establish identity and credentials. A well-executed anchor tattoo marked the bearer as a genuine sailor, someone who had earned their place through experience rather than pretense. Pirates, who often needed to blend in with legitimate merchant crews or pass themselves off as experienced sailors when recruiting new members, found anchor tattoos useful for establishing maritime credibility. But the most poignant aspect of pirate anchor tattoos was their representation of hope in hopeless circumstances. Pirates lived knowing that their choices had cut them off from normal human connections, from the possibility of growing old surrounded by family, from the comfort of dying in familiar places among people who loved them. Yet they still hoped. They hoped for one great score that would set them up for life. They hoped for legendary status that would make their names immortal. They hoped, against all evidence and experience, that somehow their gamble with fate would pay off. The anchor tattoo was their way of saying, despite everything, I still believe in something permanent. Despite the chaos I've chosen, I still seek stability. Despite the isolation, I still need something to hold on to. It was heartbreaking and defiant in equal measure. The compass rose, also known as the nautical star, carried perhaps the most complex symbolism of all pirate tattoos. Navigation was literally a matter of life and death for anyone who made their living on the ocean. And for pirates, whose survival depended on their ability to find and escape from danger, Accurate navigation was absolutely critical. But pirate compass tattoos weren't just about practical navigation. They represented the deeper human need for direction, for knowing where you stood in the vast confusion of existence. Pirates had chosen to live outside the moral compass that guided conventional society. They had rejected the traditional markers that helped most people navigate through life: law, religion, family obligation, social expectation. In abandoning these guides, they had gained freedom, but they had also cast themselves adrift in a moral wilderness where few landmarks remained. The compass tattoo served as a replacement navigation system, a personal moral magnetic north that could guide them through decisions when all external guidance had been rejected. Different compass designs carried different meanings. A simple four-pointed star might represent the basic directions. North for home, even if home was now only a memory. South for adventure and warm waters, east for the rising sun and new beginnings, west for the setting sun, and endings that might come with either glory or death. More elaborate compass roses incorporated 8, 16, or even 32 points, representing the complexity of choices available to someone living outside conventional boundaries. Each point could represent a different aspect of pirate philosophy: courage, greed, loyalty, revenge, freedom, desperation, hope, and despair. The compass became a mandala of outlaw existence, a meditation on the directions a life could take when all normal restrictions were removed. Many pirates believed their compass tattoos possessed genuine supernatural power. They thought these markings could help them find their way through dangerous waters, guide them to treasure, or lead them safely away from pursuing naval vessels. This wasn't simply superstition. It was faith born from desperation. When you've placed yourself completely outside the protection of law and society, when you've rejected the safety nets that civilization provides, you need to believe in something. For many pirates, that something was the mystical power of their tattoos to provide guidance and protection. The placement of compass tattoos was also significant. Many pirates placed them on their forearms, where they could see them easily, while working with ropes and rigging. Others tattooed them on their chests, over their hearts, symbolizing that their navigation through life came from emotional rather than rational decision-making. Some placed compass tattoos on their backs, representing the idea that they were guided by forces they couldn't see but had to trust. The compass tattoo also served as a promise to the crew. It announced that the bearer could be trusted with navigation duties, that they possessed both the practical skills and the spiritual guidance necessary to lead their brothers safely through dangerous waters. In pirate crews, where trust was scarce but absolutely essential, any symbol that vouched for someone's reliability was valuable. Perhaps most importantly, the compass tattoo represented the pirate's relationship with fate itself. Pirates lived knowing that their destinies were largely out of their hands. They could be rich one day and poor the next, alive in the morning and dead by evening, celebrated as heroes by their crews, or condemned as cowards, based on decisions made in split seconds under extreme pressure. The compass tattoo was their way of asserting some control over this chaos, of claiming that they possessed inner guidance that could help them navigate through whatever fortune might bring. The heart tattoo among pirates carried meanings that would surprise many modern observers. We think of heart tattoos as symbols of love, romance, and emotional connection. For pirates, hearts represented something far more complex and often darker. The pain of love lost, the cruelty necessary for survival, and the terrible cost of choosing a life outside normal human relationships. Many pirates tattooed bleeding hearts, hearts pierced by daggers, or hearts wrapped in thorns. These weren't symbols of romantic passion, but representations of emotional wounds that would never heal. Pirates typically came from the lowest levels of society, and many had turned to outlawry after losing everything that mattered to them: family, home, legitimate work, social standing, and hope for conventional happiness. The bleeding heart tattoo was a permanent reminder of what they had sacrificed or lost. Some pirates had been forced to leave behind wives and children when they chose the outlaw life. Others had watched loved ones die from disease, violence, or poverty, while they were powerless to help. Still others had been betrayed by people they trusted, wounded so deeply that they could never again risk genuine emotional connection. But the heart tattoo also represented a different kind of love. Love for the pirate brotherhood itself. Pirates formed intense bonds with their crew members, relationships that were often deeper and more loyal than the family ties they had abandoned. These weren't romantic relationships, but they were passionate ones, built on shared danger, mutual dependence, and the knowledge that only these particular people could truly understand the choices that had led them all to this desperate life. The heart tattoo announced that the bearer was capable of fierce loyalty to those who earned it. But it also warned that this loyalty came at a price. Pirates who wore heart tattoos were often the most dangerous members of their crews, not because they were naturally cruel, but because their capacity for emotional pain had been so damaged that they could no longer afford the luxury of mercy or hesitation. Some pirates incorporated additional elements into their heart tattoos. Banners or ribbons might carry the names of lost loves, dead crew members, or ships that had been their homes. Flames round hearts could represent either the burning passion of love or the fires of hell that awaited those who lived by violence. Chains through hearts might symbolize the bonds of loyalty that both connected and confined pirates to their chosen lives. The placement of heart tattoos was also meaningful. Hearts over the actual heart announced that the bearer's emotions, however damaged, still guided their decisions. Hearts on the forearm might be shown to others as proof of the bearer's capacity for loyalty, or as a warning about their capacity for violence. Hearts on the back could represent the emotional burden the pirate carried, but preferred to keep hidden from the world. Perhaps most tragically, many pirate heart tattoos represented not just personal loss, but the loss of the capacity to love at all. Pirates lived in a world where emotional vulnerability was often fatal, where showing weakness or compassion could lead to mutiny, betrayal, or death. The heart tattoo became a memorial to their own emotional death, a permanent marker of what they had been forced to sacrifice in order to survive. The trident tattoo connected pirates to the most ancient and powerful forces of the sea itself. In maritime mythology, the trident belonged to Neptune, Poseidon, and other ocean gods who controlled storms, currents, and the fate of everyone who dared to venture onto the water. By tattooing tridents onto their bodies, pirates were making a bold claim. They served not human law or divine commandments, but the primal powers of the ocean itself. This wasn't mere symbolism. Pirates genuinely believed they were engaged in a form of spiritual warfare against civilization, and they needed divine allies in that struggle. The trident tattoo was both a prayer and a declaration. A prayer for protection from the ocean gods, and a declaration that the bearer served forces more ancient and powerful than any human authority. The trident also represented raw power and the willingness to use it. In mythology, tridents could calm storms or create them, part the seas or bring crushing waves, grant safe passage or drag ships to the bottom. Pirates who tattooed tridents onto their skin were announcing their intention to wield similar power in their human realm. They would not merely react to circumstances. They would shape them through force of will and violence. Many pirate trident tattoos incorporated additional oceanic elements. Tentacles might wrap around the trident shaft, representing the mysterious and dangerous creatures that lurked in ocean depths. Waves could curl around the prongs, symbolizing the bearer's mastery over dangerous waters. Lightning might strike from the trident points, suggesting the supernatural power the pirate claimed to possess. The trident tattoo also served as protection against specific maritime dangers. Pirates believed trident tattoos could protect them from drowning, from sea monsters, and from the supernatural dangers that sailors whispered about during long night watches. These weren't simply superstitions. They were survival strategies for people whose lives depended on maintaining courage in the face of constant, unknowable danger. Some pirates chose trident tattoos specifically to intimidate their enemies. The sight of a trident tattoo warned observers that they were dealing with someone who claimed the backing of ocean gods, someone who fought not just for personal gain, but as an agent of primordial forces that preceded and superseded human civilization. The placement of trident tattoos often emphasized their spiritual significance. Many pirates placed them on their chests, directly over their hearts, indicating that oceanic power flowed through their very life force. Others tattooed tridents on their arms, where they could be icily displayed during combat as psychological weapons. Some placed trident tattoos on their backs, representing the divine protection that watched over them even when they couldn't see it. But perhaps the most important aspect of the trident tattoo was its representation of the piratess' relationship with nature itself. Pirates lived closer to natural forces than almost any other humans. They understood intimately how quickly calm seas could become deadly, how completely humans were at the mercy of weather and current, how thin the line was between life and death in the ocean environment. The trident tattoo was their way of aligning themselves with these forces rather than fighting against them. It represented acceptance that they were part of something larger and more powerful than individual human will, but also claimed that this alignment gave them power that landlubbers could never possess. Religious tattoos among pirates created one of the most fascinating contradictions in tattoo history. Here were people who had rejected most of society's laws and moral codes, who lived by violence and theft, who had often abandoned family and community obligations. Yet many still maintained complex relationships with Christian faith and other religious traditions. Pirates weren't simply godless criminals. Despite their popular reputation, many came from deeply religious backgrounds and carried those spiritual influences with them into their outlaw lives. Others encountered religious symbols and practices during their travels to different cultures and incorporated elements that appealed to them. Still others turned to religion as a form of spiritual insurance, hoping that maintaining some connection to divine power might protect them or earn them forgiveness for their crimes. Christian crosses were among the most common religious tattoos among Caribbean and Atlantic pirates. But these weren't the simple symbols of faith that might be found on legitimate churchgoers. Pirate crosses often incorporated darker elements: skulls at the intersection, chains wrapped around the arms, thorns instead of smooth wood, or blood dripping from the crossbeams. These tattoos represented complicated relationships with Christianity, acknowledging both the hope for salvation and the knowledge that their lives had placed them far outside conventional Christian morality. Some pirates tattooed biblical scenes or figures, but with distinctly piratical interpretations. Images of David fighting Goliath might emphasize the violence of the combat rather than the triumph of faith. Depictions of Jesus might focus on his suffering and death rather than his resurrection and glory. These tattoos reflected the pirates' understanding of their relationship with divine power. They identified more with biblical characters who struggled, suffered, and fought than with those who found peace and prosperity. Eastern religious symbols became increasingly common among pirates who operated in the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Dragons, lotus flowers, Buddhist wheels, and Hindu deities appeared in pirate tattoos as these outlaws encountered different spiritual traditions during their travels. These weren't necessarily signs of religious conversion, but rather examples of pirates' practical approach to spirituality. If a symbol or practice might provide protection or power, they were willing to incorporate it into their personal spiritual arsenal. Islamic crescents, Jewish stars, and other religious symbols also appeared in pirate tattoos, often combined in ways that would horrify orthodox practitioners of these faiths. Pirates created their own syncretic spiritual systems, borrowing elements from whatever traditions they encountered and combining them in ways that made sense for their particular circumstances and needs. The placement of religious tattoos often reflected the pirates' ambivalent relationships with their faith. Some placed crosses and other religious symbols prominently on their chests or forearms, announcing their spiritual connections to the world. Others hid religious tattoos in places where they could be concealed, perhaps feeling some shame about maintaining faith while living lives that contradicted most religious teachings. Many pirate religious tattoos served as spiritual contracts or bargaining chips. Pirates might tattoo a particular saint or religious figure with the understanding that this created a special relationship that could be called upon in times of extreme danger. Others used religious tattoos as forms of insurance, hoping that maintaining visible connections to divine power would earn them some protection, or at least reduce their punishment in whatever afterlife awaited them. The psychological function of religious tattoos among pirates cannot be understated. These men and women had chosen lives that isolated them from most human communities and social support systems. Religious tattoos provided connection to something larger and more permanent than their temporary pirate crews, something that might continue to exist even after their inevitably violent deaths. Eastern tattoos among pirates told stories of adventure, cultural exchange, and the global nature of piracy during its golden age. As European piracy spread beyond the Caribbean and Atlantic, pirates increasingly operated in Asian waters, establishing bases in Madagascar, the Indian Ocean, and throughout Southeast Asia. These encounters with Eastern cultures profoundly influenced pirate tattoo traditions. Dragons were among the most popular Eastern motifs adopted by pirates, but their meaning in pirate culture differed significantly from their significance in Chinese, Japanese, or Southeast Asian traditions. In Eastern cultures, dragons often represented wisdom, benevolent power, and good fortune. For pirates, dragons became symbols of supernatural ferocity, untamable wildness, and power that existed outside human control or understanding. Pirate dragon tattoos often incorporated Western elements that changed their traditional meanings. Dragons might be shown breathing fire at ships, clutching treasure chests, or battling with European mythological creatures. These hybrid designs reflected the cultural mixing that occurred as European pirates operated in Asian waters and recruited crew members from local populations. Koi fish, cherry blossoms, and other Japanese motifs appeared in pirate tattoos as these outlaws encountered Japanese culture through trade and conflict. However, pirates typically focused on the more dramatic and violent aspects of these symbols. Koi fish, which in Japanese culture represent perseverance and spiritual transformation, became symbols of survival against impossible odds in pirate interpretation. Cherry blossoms, representing the beautiful brevity of life in Japanese aesthetics, became reminders of the violent brevity of pirate existence. Hindu and Buddhist symbols also found their way into pirate tattoos through contact with Indian Ocean cultures. Lotus flowers, wheels of Dharma, and images of various Hindu deities appeared on pirate skin, often combined with Western symbols in ways that created entirely new meanings. These weren't typically signs of religious conversion, but rather examples of pirates' practical spirituality. They collected powerful symbols from whatever cultures they encountered, hoping that accumulating diverse forms of spiritual protection might improve their odds of survival. Southeast Asian tattoo traditions had a particularly strong influence on pirates operating in those waters. The intricate geometric patterns, mystical scripts, and protective symbols of Thai, Cambodian, and Indonesian tattoo cultures appealed to pirates who were already inclined to believe in the supernatural power of body art. Many pirates commissioned traditional Southeast Asian tattoos from local practitioners, often not fully understanding their meanings but trusting in their protective power. The adoption of Eastern tattoo motifs also served practical purposes for pirates operating in Asian waters. These tattoos helped pirates blend in with local populations, establish their credentials as experienced travelers, and sometimes gain access to communities that might otherwise be suspicious of European strangers. Pirates who could display authentic-looking Asian tattoos were more likely to be accepted in local ports, and might find it easier to recruit crew members from indigenous populations. Perhaps most importantly, Eastern tattoos represented the global scope of pirate ambition and the cosmopolitan nature of pirate culture at its height. Pirates weren't simply European criminals operating in familiar waters. They were international outlaws who had rejected not just the laws of their birth countries, but the entire concept of national boundaries and cultural limitations. The mixing of Eastern and Western tattoo traditions in pirate culture created something entirely new, a truly international symbolic language that transcended cultural boundaries. Pirates with Chinese dragons and Christian crosses, Buddhist wheels and Islamic crescents, Hindu deities and European anchors, carried on their skin the story of a global criminal subculture that was, in its own violent way, one of the first truly international communities in human history. But beyond their cultural significance, Eastern tattoos among pirates served the same fundamental psychological functions as Western ones. They provided spiritual protection, announced personal identity, and connected their bearers to sources of power and meaning that existed outside the conventional social structures they had rejected. Whether that power came from Chinese dragons or Christian saints mattered less than the belief that it existed and could be accessed through the permanent marking of flesh. Pirates used tattoos as living resumes, permanent records of their experiences, achievements, and credentials in a world where documentation was scarce and deception was common. Unlike conventional society, where people's histories were recorded in official documents, church records, and community memory, pirate society was largely illiterate and constantly mobile. Tattoos became the primary method for preserving and communicating personal history. Different tattoos told different parts of a pirate's story. The number and type of ship tattoos might indicate how many vessels the bearer had served on, captured, or sunk. Anchor tattoos could represent years of service at sea, while more elaborate designs might indicate specific ranks or specialties. Battle scene tattoos commemorated particular engagements, especially those where the bearer had shown exceptional courage or survival skills. Many pirates developed personal tattoo vocabularies that could be read by other members of their community. A series of small crosses might represent the number of men killed in combat. Stars could indicate successful voyages or treasure discoveries. Numerical tattoos, often disguised within larger designs, might record specific achievements: ships taken, battles survived, years at sea, or amounts of treasure accumulated. These biographical tattoos served crucial social functions within pirate communities. In a world where anyone might be lying about their experience, skills, or loyalty, tattoos provided evidence that was difficult to fake. The quality, style, and aging of tattoos could help establish their authenticity. And experienced pirates could often tell whether someone's tattoo history matched their claimed background. Tattoos also functioned as credentials when pirates needed to join new crews or establish their status in unfamiliar pirate havens. A pirate arriving in a new port could display their tattoos as proof of their experience, skills, and commitment to the outlaw life. Captains looking to recruit crew members could read potential recruits' tattoos to assess their qualifications and trustworthiness. Some tattoos served as proof of membership in specific pirate organizations or allegiance to particular captains. These might be as simple as shared symbols adopted by all members of a crew, or as complex as coded designs that indicated the bearer's role within a larger pirate confederation. Pirates who had served under famous captains might tattoo symbols associated with those leaders, creating permanent connections to legendary figures that enhanced their own reputations. Location tattoos were particularly important for establishing credentials. Pirates who had operated in especially dangerous or exotic waters might tattoo symbols associated with those regions. Palm trees for Caribbean service, ice crystals for northern waters, exotic animals for service in distant seas, or local cultural symbols for extended operations in foreign waters. These geographical tattoos proved that the bearer had experience in diverse conditions and could be trusted to perform in unfamiliar environments. The most prestigious biographical tattoos were those that commemorated survival of legendary dangers. Pirates who had survived major storms might tattoo wave patterns or wind symbols. Those who had escaped from naval capture might incorporate broken chains or prison bars into their designs. Survivors of shipwrecks might add sinking ship motifs to their collections. These survival tattoos were worn with pride, as they proved the bearer possessed the skill, courage, and luck necessary to succeed in the most dangerous profession imaginable. Some pirates used their tattoos to maintain connections to their past lives before piracy. Family names, hometown symbols, or references to legitimate trades might be incorporated into designs, allowing pirates to maintain some link to their origins without compromising their current identities. These personal history tattoos often became more important to pirates as they aged and began to contemplate what they had sacrificed for their outlaw lives. The accumulation of biographical tattoos over time created visual narratives of entire pirate careers. Experienced pirates might carry dozens of tattoos, each one marking a specific chapter in their adventures. These tattoo collections became treasured possessions, more valuable than any monetary treasure, because they represented irreplaceable experiences and achievements that no one could steal or destroy. Unfortunately, biographical tattoos could also serve as evidence against pirates when they were captured by authorities. Legal records from pirate trials often include detailed descriptions of defendants' tattoos, which were used to establish their identities and connect them to specific crimes. In this way, the same markings that enhanced pirates' reputations within their own communities could become the evidence that sealed their fates when justice finally caught up with them. The influence of pirate tattoos on modern tattoo culture is both profound and largely unrecognized. Many designs that we consider classic American tattoo imagery actually trace their origins directly back to the golden age of piracy. The visual vocabulary that emerged from pirate culture during the 17th and 18th centuries laid the foundation for traditional Western tattoo art that continues to influence body art today. The skull and crossbones, arguably the most recognizable symbol in Western tattoo culture, began its journey to mainstream popularity in pirate communities. Modern skull tattoos, whether realistic portraits or stylized designs, carry forward the pirate tradition of using death imagery to express rebellion against conventional mortality anxiety. Contemporary tattoo enthusiasts often choose skull designs without fully understanding that they are participating in a tradition that began with people who lived in constant proximity to violent death. Anchor tattoos remain one of the most popular traditional designs in modern tattoo culture, especially among people with military or maritime connections. But the symbolism has evolved significantly from its pirate origins, where pirates tattooed anchors to represent their commitment to a life of oceanic outlawry. Modern anchor tattoos typically symbolize stability, hope, and connection to home. This transformation reflects how pirate symbols have been domesticated and made safe for mainstream consumption. Nautical star and compass rose tattoos have experienced massive popularity in contemporary tattoo culture, often chosen by people who have never spent significant time at sea. These designs appeal to modern tattoo enthusiasts because they suggest navigation, direction, and the ability to find one's way through life's challenges. The original pirate meaning of these tattoos, as spiritual protection and literal navigation aids, has been transformed into metaphorical guidance systems for people navigating modern life's complexities. Traditional American tattoo art, as codified by artists like Norman Collins, Sailor Jerry, in the mid-20th century, drew heavily on pirate tattoo traditions. Collins and his contemporaries understood that the most powerful tattoo designs were those that had been tested and refined through generations of use by people whose lives depended on the psychological and spiritual power of their markings. By studying and adapting pirate tattoo imagery, these artists created a distinctly American tattoo aesthetic that dominated Western body art for decades. The modern association between tattoos and rebellious subcultures also traces back to pirate origins. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, tattoos remained primarily associated with sailors, criminals, and social outcasts, maintaining the outlaw reputation they had gained during the golden age of piracy. Even as tattoos have gained mainstream acceptance in recent decades, they retain some of their countercultural significance, appealing to people who want to express their rejection of conventional social expectations. Motorcycle clubs, military units, and other tight-knit organizations have adopted the pirate practice of using tattoos to signify group membership and individual achievement within the group. The patches and colors that biker gangs use to identify themselves serve similar functions to pirate tattoos, but many bikers also use actual tattoos in ways that directly mirror pirate practices. To record personal history, demonstrate commitment to outlaw values, and establish credentials within criminal subcultures. Modern military tattoo culture, especially within special forces and combat units, shows clear influence from pirate traditions. Military personnel often tattoo unit insignias, battle commemorations, and survival records in ways that closely parallel how pirates use tattoos to record their martial achievements. The psychological functions of these military tattoos: building unit cohesion, processing trauma, asserting warrior identity, mirror the functions that tattoos served for pirate crews. The globalization of tattoo culture in the late 20th and early 21st centuries has created a situation that would have been familiar to pirates of the Golden Age. Tattoo enthusiasts now collect designs from diverse cultural traditions, combining Eastern and Western motifs in personal arrangements that reflect their individual travels and interests. Modern tattoo collectors, who accumulate pieces from different artists and cultural traditions, are following a practice that pirates pioneered centuries ago. Contemporary tattoo television shows, conventions, and social media have created communities around tattoo culture that serve some of the same social functions that tattoos served in pirate communities, establishing identity, demonstrating commitment to subcultural values, and providing common ground for people who might otherwise have little in common. While modern tattoo enthusiasts rarely face the life-or-death situations that made tattoos psychologically necessary for pirates, they use tattoos to navigate their own forms of social uncertainty and identity formation. Perhaps most significantly, the modern understanding of tattoos as permanent personal statements that should reflect authentic individual identity rather than temporary fashion trends connects directly back to pirate tattoo philosophy. Pirates understood that tattoos would be with them for life, that these markings would become permanent parts of their identity, and they chose their designs accordingly. This approach to tattooing, a serious personal transformation rather than casual decoration, has become increasingly important as tattoos have gained mainstream acceptance, and people have learned to think more carefully about their body art choices. The psychological power that made tattoos valuable to pirates continues to make them valuable to modern enthusiasts. The transformation that comes from permanently marking one's body, the sense of commitment that comes from making irreversible choices, and the creation of physical reminders of important experiences, beliefs, and relationships. However, there are crucial differences between pirate tattoos and their modern descendants. Pirates tattooed themselves out of genuine spiritual need, practical necessity, and desperate hope for protection in a world where death was always imminent. Modern tattoo enthusiasts, while they may face their own challenges and uncertainties, rarely operate in life-or-death situations where their tattoos serve as literal survival tools. This difference in context has led to a domestication of pirate symbolism, where images that once carried genuine supernatural significance have become primarily aesthetic choices. The commercialization of tattoo culture has also created a distance from pirate origins, where pirates received their tattoos in crude, painful sessions using improvised equipment and basic pigments. Modern tattoo enthusiasts can choose from thousands of professional artists using sophisticated equipment and medical-grade materials. This evolution has made tattooing safer and more accessible. But it has also removed much of the physical and psychological intensity that made tattoos so meaningful to their pirate originators. Despite these changes, the fundamental appeal of tattoos remains constant across centuries. They offer a way to assert individual identity, connect with like-minded communities, and create permanent reminders of what matters most to us. Pirates may have invented many of the symbols and practices that continue to define tattoo culture, but each generation reinterprets these traditions according to their own needs and circumstances. The persistence of pirate-inspired imagery in modern tattoo culture speaks to the enduring power of the symbols themselves. Images that emerged from genuine encounters with mortality, violence, and spiritual crisis continue to resonate with people who face different but equally real challenges in contemporary life. The skull reminds us that life is temporary and should be lived fully. The anchor suggests that even in chaos we can find stability. The compass promises that we can navigate through uncertainty toward our chosen destinations. In many ways, modern tattoo culture has fulfilled the democratic promise that was implicit in pirate tattooing. Pirates used tattoos to create identity and community outside the rigid hierarchies of conventional society. Contemporary tattoo culture has expanded this possibility, allowing people from all backgrounds to use body art as a tool for self-expression and social connection. What began as a desperate survival strategy among oceanic outlaws has evolved into a mainstream art form that serves millions of people in their ongoing attempts to understand and express who they are. The story of pirate tattoos ultimately reveals something profound about human nature and the ways we create meaning in uncertain times. Pirates lived in extreme circumstances that stripped away most of the social structures that normally help people make sense of their lives. In response, they developed new forms of identity and community, using their own bodies as canvases for creating the symbols and stories they needed to survive psychologically as well as physically. This pattern repeats throughout history. When conventional meaning systems fail or are rejected, people create new ones, often using their bodies as the primary medium for these experiments in identity and community formation. Pirates were among the first to do this on a global scale, creating an international symbolic language that transcended national and cultural boundaries. Their success in using tattoos to build identity and community in the absence of traditional social structures provided a template that continues to influence how people use body art today. The tattoos that pirates carried on their skin were never just decorations. They were survival tools, spiritual armor, identity documents, and historical records all combined into permanent markings that would last as long as the pirates themselves lived. Each tattoo told part of a story about people who had chosen to live entirely outside the safety and restrictions of civilized society. People who had traded security for freedom and respectability for adventure. When we look at pirate tattoos, we're not just seeing historical curiosities or primitive art forms. We're seeing the visual evidence of one of humanity's most dramatic experiments in alternative living. Pirates created their own nation without borders, their own religion without churches, their own legal system without courts, and their own art form without galleries. Their tattoos were the primary means by which they documented and transmitted this radical cultural experiment. The meanings embedded in pirate tattoos were complex, contradictory, and deeply personal. A single tattoo might simultaneously represent hope and despair, love and violence, faith and rebellion. This complexity reflects the contradiction inherent in pirate existence itself. These were people who had gained ultimate freedom by accepting ultimate risk, who had found brotherhood by rejecting all other human connections, who had achieved legendary status by choosing lives that were likely to be brutally short. Understanding pirate tattoos requires understanding the mindset of people who had pushed human existence to its absolute limits. They lived knowing that each day might be their last, that their choices had cut them off from normal human experiences like family, home, and peaceful old age. In such circumstances, tattoos became essential psychological tools for maintaining sanity, identity, and purpose. The spiritual aspects of pirate tattoos cannot be dismissed as mere superstition. When you live in constant proximity to death, when you depend entirely on natural forces you cannot control, when you exist completely outside the protection of law and society, belief in supernatural protection becomes a practical necessity. Pirates needed to believe that their tattoos could protect them, guide them, and connect them to sources of power beyond the physical world. This belief was often all that stood between them and complete despair. The social functions of pirate tattoos were equally crucial. These markings created bonds among people who had no other basis for trust or cooperation. Pirates came from different nations, spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, and had abandoned different lives to join the brotherhood of outlaws. Shared tattoo traditions provided common ground, shared symbols, and mutual recognition that helped forge functional communities from otherwise incompatible individuals. Perhaps most importantly, pirate tattoos served as permanent commitments to choices that could never be undone. Getting tattooed was itself an act of piracy against one's own body. A permanent marking that announced the bearer's willingness to live with the consequences of irreversible decisions. In a life defined by such choices, the choice to steal, to kill, to abandon family, to reject society, tattoos provided a way of embracing and celebrating the irreversibility that defined pirate existence. The legacy of pirate tattoos extends far beyond their influence on contemporary body art. These markings represent one of humanity's most successful experiments in creating meaning and community under extreme conditions. Pirates faced challenges that few humans have ever encountered. Complete isolation from conventional support systems, constant physical danger, moral ambiguity that would break most people's spirits, and the knowledge that their choices had almost certainly condemned them to violent deaths. In response to these challenges, they created a culture that was remarkably sophisticated in its understanding of human psychological needs. Pirate tattoo traditions addressed the fundamental human requirements for identity, community, spiritual connection, and historical continuity. They did so using tools and techniques that were crude by modern standards, but their psychological insights were profound and their solutions were effective. The tattoos pirates wore were physical proof that humans can adapt to almost any circumstances, that we can create meaning and beauty even in the most desperate situations, and that art and symbolism are not luxuries, but essential tools for psychological survival. Every pirate tattoo was a small victory against despair, a permanent declaration that the person wearing it refused to surrender their humanity, even when everything else had been lost or abandoned. Modern observers often romanticize pirate life, focusing on the adventure and freedom while ignoring the brutality and tragedy that defined pirate existence. Pirate tattoos provide a more honest window into what this life was actually like. These markings reveal people who were simultaneously courageous and desperate, loyal and ruthless, spiritual and violent. They show us individuals who had been pushed to the edges of human experience, but who continued to seek connection, meaning, and beauty even in their extremity. The contradictions visible in pirate tattoos reflect the contradictions inherent in human nature itself. We are capable of remarkable cruelty and remarkable compassion, often simultaneously. We can reject every social institution while still desperately seeking community. We can live as if death means nothing while simultaneously marking our bodies with symbols that we hope will protect us from that very fate. Pirates understood these contradictions better than most people, because their circumstances forced them to confront the full complexity of human nature without the comforting illusions that civilization provides. Their tattoos documented this confrontation, creating a visual record of what humans look like when stripped of social pretenses and forced to rely on their most basic instincts for survival. The fact that pirate tattoo imagery continues to resonate centuries after the golden age of piracy ended suggests that the psychological needs these tattoos addressed remain relevant. Modern people may not face the specific dangers that pirates encountered, but we still struggle with mortality, identity, community, and meaning. We still need symbols that connect us to something larger than ourselves, markers that remind us who we are and what we value, and permanent commitments that anchor us in an uncertain world. Pirate tattoos succeeded because they addressed these universal human needs in ways that were both practical and profound. They created beauty from brutality, meaning from chaos, and community from isolation. They proved that even in the most desperate circumstances, humans will continue to seek ways to express their deepest values and most important relationships. The pirates who wore these tattoos lived lives that most of us would find unimaginably difficult. They faced dangers we can barely comprehend, made choices we hope never to face, and accepted consequences we would find unbearable. But they also achieved something remarkable. They created their own form of immortality through the symbols they carved into their skin and the meanings they embedded in those symbols. Every time someone today chooses a skull tattoo, an anchor design, or a compass rose, they're participating in traditions that began with people who lived at the absolute edges of human experience. They're connecting with a form of human expression that emerged from genuine encounters with mortality, violence, and spiritual crisis. They're re-inheriting symbols that were tested and refined by people whose lives depended on the psychological power of their markings. This connection across centuries suggests something profound about the nature of human expression and the persistence of symbolic meaning. The images that pirates tattooed onto their bodies continue to speak to us because they emerged from authentic human experiences that transcend historical context: fear, hope, love, loyalty, rebellion, and the search for protection and meaning are constants in human experience, even when the specific circumstances that provoke these feelings change dramatically over time. To us, tattoos are art. To pirates, tattoos were their soul, carved forever on their skin. They were maps of inner territory, guides to survival, prayers for protection, and declarations of independence from every authority except their own desperate courage. They were the permanent signatures of people who had chosen to write their lives in their own blood and ink. People who understood that in a world where everything can be taken from you, the marks you make on your own body are the only possessions that truly belong to you. The next time you see someone with a traditional tattoo design, remember that you're looking at symbols that were born in the crucible of human extremity, tested by people who lived entirely outside the safety of civilization, and proven effective by individuals who survived some of the most dangerous and desperate circumstances in human history. These aren't just pretty pictures or fashion statements. They read the visual legacy of people who pushed human existence to its absolute limits and found ways to create meaning, beauty, and community even there. The story of pirate tattoos is ultimately the story of human resilience, creativity, and the unbreakable need to find meaning in our experiences, no matter how extreme those experiences might be. Pirates may have been criminals and outcasts, but they were also artists, philosophers, and spiritual seekers who used their bodies as canvases for exploring the deepest questions of human existence. Their tattoos remain as permanent as the marks they made on history itself, continuing to influence and inspire people who seek to understand what it means to live authentically in an uncertain world. In the end, pirate tattoos teach us that art and meaning can emerge from any circumstances, that humans will find ways to express their deepest truths, even when everything else has been stripped away, and that the symbols we choose to carry permanently on our bodies reveal more about us than perhaps any other form of human expression. They remind us that every tattoo is a form of piracy against the blank canvas of unmarked skin, a permanent rebellion against the temporary nature of human existence. and a declaration that some things' identity, meaning, memory, and hope are worth marking permanently on the only territory that truly belongs to us, our own bodies. If you've been fascinated by the hidden meanings behind pirate tattoos, you'll want to discover the equally intriguing world of pirate treasure maps and their secret codes. These weren't just simple drawings showing where to dig. They were complex documents filled with hidden symbols, coded messages, and deliberately misleading information designed to protect their secrets from anyone who might steal them. Join us next time as we decode the mysterious language of pirate cartography and reveal the ingenious methods pirates used to hide their most valuable secrets in plain sight.